Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings, but this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018, and no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy.
Sonali Dev is the author of Lies and Other Love Languages, a novel. Sonali's first literary work was a play about mistaken identities performed at her neighborhood Diwali extravaganza in Mumbai. She was 8 years old. Despite this early success, she spent the next few decades getting degrees in architecture and writing, migrating across the globe and starting a family while writing for magazines and websites. With the advent of her first gray hair, her mad love for telling stories returned full force, and she now combines it with her insights into Indian culture to conjure up stories that make a mad tangle with her life as a supermom, domestic goddess, and world traveler. Sonali lives in the Chicago suburbs with her very patient and often amused husband and 2 teens who demand both patience and humor and the world's most perfect dog. Her novels have been on Library Journal, NPR, Washington Post, and Kirkus's Best Books of the Year lists. She has won the American Library Association's Award for Best Romance, the RT Reviewer Choice Award for Best Contemporary Romance, multiple RT Seals of Excellence, is a Rita finalist, and has been listed for the Dublin Literary Award. Shelf Awareness calls her not only one of the best, but one of the bravest romance novelists working today. She has been on this podcast at least one other time. And the interesting news, well, I guess you can just hear it in the episode, which major celebrity is now behind Sonali's success. Welcome, Sonali. Thank you for coming back on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books, this time to discuss lies and other love languages. You're writing books so fast, I cannot keep up.
Thank you. Am I? I think that's this is what I do full time. This is what I do 24/7. So, and there's so many stories in there in a short life. So they've all got to come out, right? But thank you for having me. It's always such a pleasure to be here and, to watch everything you're doing for publishing, for women, for moms. So thank you. I am so glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Tell listeners about Lies and Other Love Languages.
So I think I was actually I'm staying with my nephew right now, who's, 26. And I was telling him it's probably my most adult book. And I don't mean that in a way that the word is usually used. But so in the simplest way for me to describe it based on where it came from was it's a love letter to female friendships. Mm-hmm. So it's the story of these 2 women who are best friends. And we know how our friendships are. So, I always think my girlfriends are my soulmates, really. My husband is my husband and I love him dearly, but my soulmates, because the ones who see everything without translation, like that kind of connection, and who've seen me since I was, 5 and 10 and 12 are my girlfriends. And it's a story of how these 2 girls become friends when they're 12, which is a very vulnerable age. And, growing up one of them is growing up in LA, the only South Asian girl in her class. And then this girl who's had a horrific childhood in India moves to LA, and they meet under circumstances which are kind of tragic, but it changes their lives and who they become. And so it's that kind of friendship. And then we meet them 27 years after their friendship has broken up. So it is about what happens to us when we lose our, female friendships that define us. And it happens over motherhood. It happens over, a surrogacy arrangement. And so it's a story, I think, of marriage and friendship and, and the way that everything breaks down is a DNA test, which is another thing in our world right now, which is, blowing stuff up that didn't blow up before. So there you have it.
So true. But it's also, about motherhood and caretaking and fear. I mean, you start the whole book with, the anxiety that is so pervasive right now in so many different contexts of what happens. What if we can't find the one we love? What if what if an ordinary afternoon is something much more heavy? And, fortunately it's resolved quickly, but still, I mean, that not knowing, and no matter how good your life is or how successful you are, like Vandy, it doesn't matter. None of it really matters if the person you care about the most is having something major go on.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, loss, right? I think it's really interesting. I like to say that everything in the world we do and everything that can solve all problems and cause all problems is love. But really how that I think operates in the world is through fear and fear of loss, because it is almost impossible to love without fear of loss, right? Like the true enlightenment, I think, where we're all kind of trying to work toward is being able to love without the fear of loss. And I think every problem in the world today exists because the fear of losing what is yours, right? Like we've been taught that is, and then we've also been taught that, whether it is our loved ones or land or whatever, right? To love is to fight for it not being lost, right? So this book kicks off with a mother kind of not having any idea where her 27-year-old daughter, who she's very close to and texts and talks to like 5 times a day, hasn't been answering her texts, didn't come to pick her up at the airport. So it's it's for their relationship, it's kind of, she has no idea where she is. And she's lost her husband and the girl has lost her father about a year ago. So they're still kind of in that relying on each other and yet not grief phase. And so it kicks off with this mother not knowing where her child is, essentially. And I think that's the fear of, again, losing someone who, again, we love beyond reason, right? Which is a thing. And then I think a lot of it also is defining motherhood. What does it mean, right? And why do we feel the need to be defined by it? Because, we're surrounded by women who feel the need to reinforce every 5 minutes in a conversation, oh, my children come first, which may be true. But the thing is, society also defines us by, how we are as mother. And then what happens to all the women who aren't interested in that role? Are you less of a woman? Like, what does that mean? So a lot of those things, because between these two friends, one has always known, like, that is her, and I can completely understand that because and I think from everything I know of you, you can totally understand that, right? It's a definitive part of who we always wanted to be, who we've become. It has given us so much power to be ourselves and all of that, right? And so one of them is that I know how to do this. I'm going to do this. And this is going to, allow me to be my best human self, motherhood. And the other one has, had the kind of mother and the kind of life where she thinks bringing a child into this world is an impossibility for her. She's never going to do it. So these are these two friends. And, and I think that kind of explains the spectrum of women, and both are, there's, in terms of humanity, nobody is less or more or anything, right? It's whatever our life experiences, our natural nature, and what we've been taught about ourselves. So it's that when you're taught you can only be complete doing an X thing, and if the X thing doesn't happen, what then, right? And if you've always said, I'm never having children, and a situation comes when, for someone who means everything to you to have what they want, will you do that? So funny story is, I think where the seed of this story came from was when a friend of mine, one of my, soulmate friends who I love dearly, dearly, was kind of told that it's probably not going to happen for her. And we were having a conversation of whether I had 2 children at that point. I actually loved being pregnant, and, labor and delivery, people hate me for, for saying this, but I did. It was
no judgment.
The best experience of my life. Motherhood is different, but the delivery and labor was, but so it was a conversation we actually had, like, how far would you go? What would that involve to carry a child that is not yours? And, what are those, because I would obviously know this child for the rest of my life, because this is, so that was a conversation where this really actually story started from.
Wow. I was wondering where it came from. You have there are no limits to your ideas here. You mentioned that this is a more adult story. I was sort of struck by the voice of Vandy's daughter. What is her name? Mika? No.
Mika, yes.
Yeah,
yes. Mika. Malika Mika is what she calls her.
Mika. The way that Mika wrote was not, there was a huge discrepancy with voice, right? Her voice was a much younger voice. In fact, almost younger than you would think a 27-year-old would be writing, right? So speak a little bit about that and how you defined her voice versus her mom's voice versus her friend, all of that.
Yeah, so this book is written in alternating POVs between these three women, and two of them are 55, 57, and one of them is 27, and I am surrounded by 20 somethings. My kids are in their 20s. My friends' kids who are like kids to me are that age, and I think that there is so this is what I hear, right? Also, I think Mika's character particularly is a character who's been protected. So the other thing I think I was exploring in this, as a mother who is, who's, I don't want to, as a mother who has done, well at something or is publicly visible, my children have had to, ride on that bus since they were in, elementary school, where, their friends' parents read my book and things like that. So a little bit of they're not quite Taylor Swift's kids, but you know what I mean. It's they have lived in that, and so I think when you grow up, I had successful parents. So I think like being the child of a successful parent and what that comes with. And Malika's parents are, her mother is an internationally best-selling author. She's a self-help guru. She's an advice columnist who millions and millions of people around the world listen to, for life advice. So she's, this public figure who is what everyone's aspiring to. And her father has written, 20 plus books. So extremely successful parents. And the sense of I will never be good enough that she carries because of it. Also, in a larger context, there's this whole, certain immigrant communities and how much they value academic success and professional success and how much pressure there is to succeed in that way. And how much importance is given to that, right? I mean, I have a 22-year-old and a 24-year-old, and everyone around them is constantly talking about how someone else went to XYZ school, is working for XYZ company, things like that. So that's, even as a parent, if you try not to overtly, pressure in that way, the world they live in is that. So I think Mika's world is very much that, very successful cousins, very successful parents, all of that. So she is a little bit, I think, in terms of voice, stunted in terms of confidence, how ready she feels for the world. And I think the story is her finding that piece, because, she's spectacular in every way. Everybody is, every child is, has the potential for that. And what she doesn't know is the story of her mother, and how hard she struggled to come into herself, because what she sees of her mother, as our kids often do, is us on the other side of this journey, right? And they don't see us in that same where they are, which is, feeling completely lost and adrift. And so I think that's why, to me, Mika's voice was, very much a reflection of a person who doesn't know herself yet, who feels afraid that she's never going to be good enough. So I think that's kind of where she was. And of course, Vandy and Rani, we get to see from when they are 12 to growing up. So we watch them as the book unfolds, kind of come into themselves. And Malika go the opposite way also, right? Where she kind of meets up, with herself and who she's going to be.
Do you miss these characters?
Oh my gosh. I was just, people ask me all the time, which is your favorite book? And I was, someone was asking me yesterday, and I'm like, the thing you have to understand is that these are not characters to me, right? These are real people who live in my head, like real, like I think I was reading about the neuroscience behind this. And I think even as readers, we don't know the difference. We don't, this is why we can cry, in such a heartbroken way at the pain of people on the page or the screen, is because our brain doesn't know the difference between, a made up, a fictitious thing and a real thing, between lies, and truth. And I think for writers, even more so, I just, finished the book that will come out in 24 or 25. And man, like every night I'm dreaming. And so I have to give myself that time for to actually work them out of my system in a way of being so present all the time. And the ironic thing is when when we're talking about lies and other love languages, in my brain is the next book, which will come out next year.
Okay, tell me about that. Tell me, I know you're like, I'm even over these characters. Let me just.
I I'm so not over them. I'm kind of, I mean, if you talk to me about my first book, they're still like immediately like physically alive in my brain. So I don't know how that's going to end for me. I don't know. We should do some research on author brains at, toward the end of life, and how so many, created realities sitting in your head, what that means for you. I know some authors in their 70s and they seem mentally still very much present. And so I have hope that it's not going to short circuit my brain, but sometimes it feels like it's going to.
Interesting.
But the next book that I just finished is, I mean, I don't know if I can talk about it, but it's the story of this young woman who has gone off to New York City for her engagement moon by herself because her orthopedic surgeon fiance, who is the catch of Browntown, so to speak. So it's this whole, again, it's set in Naperville, where I live, which has a very vibrant, incredibly successful and very large South Asian American community. And of course, that comes with, all of the gossip and the aspiration and all that. And so she's grown up in that. She's kind of come in from the fringes because her family rose from poverty, which is not a normal, thing for that community. And she goes off on her engagement moon by herself because he's had to reschedule 3 times. And then she's like, and she's never left Naperville. And so she shows up in New York. And when she's here, she finds a ring, on the pavement when she drops something. And then she kind of gets obsessed with finding the owner of the ring. And then it is this whole unraveling and traveling across, traveling from here to India, traveling across kind of time and space, and finding out who that ring and a twin ring belonged to.
Love it. Well, that sounds great too. My goodness.
Thank you.
And then are you already drumming up ideas for the book after that?
I always have, I think far too many ideas sitting in my head. But at that point, something has to, like, for it to really come up, something has to be bothering me, or something has to kind of, stick in my, at that moment in time, I think. And in terms of zeitgeist, something has to become really important. So I don't know yet. It's often, I think, things that we deal with as women, as, daughters, wives, that sort of thing. So I'm kind of, I have a few ideas, but I'm waiting to see what's truly enraging me or amusing me right now.
I love that. That's so cool. And how is it going with your partnership with Mindy Kaling?
It's so, well, partnership is a stretch. I would love for Mindy to be my partner in any way she wants. But she's the Vibrant Years, which was the book that came out last year, was launched Mindy's publishing imprint, which was Mindy's book studio, and it's been optioned for a film with her and Amazon Studios. So I'm very excited. Everything with filming, was and yay for the writer's strike. But so we're waiting to see where it goes. I am incredibly hopeful, but we'll see. How all of that works. But I'm so excited. I'm hoping that it happens. So I think that's the next step in our partnership, so to speak.
I would call it a partnership.
yeah. But she's. I think. Just what she has done, I think, for creators of color, in terms of visibility, in terms of opportunity, and how much she has used that platform. And it's not overnight. For like 20 or 30 years, she's been working to get to a place where she can kind of take us into into the spotlight a little bit more than we've ever been afforded. And so I think, it's just, even to just be associated with her or in her presence, for me particularly, is very special, because as an artist and as a writer, I'm absolutely in awe. The range of the kind of writing she's done, starting from The Office to the film with Emma Thompson, to Sex Life of College Girls and Mindy Project and Never Have I Ever, like the range of various voices, that she's, and because we're not a monolith, and there's just so much to show, and we haven't had the opportunity up until now. And so I always say we're at the front of the battering ram, a few of us, because we're while breaking down those walls or that glass ceiling or whatever. So she's just the talent itself, everything else aside, like her sheer talent as a writer, I think is the single most important thing for me, to be kind of admired or to be selected, by someone whose work you admire, I think is incredibly special. Everybody has, a lot of people have platforms and have megaphones now, but when someone's work makes you, like tremble on the inside and laugh out loud and kind of just come into yourself, I think it's really special to get to work with people like that.
Amazing. Yeah, you have to be inspired, right? I mean,
oh my gosh, yes. And so it's so inspiring. Just, I think hard work is incredibly inspiring. Talent is incredibly inspiring, and those two things together. And whatever fortune shines up on us, it's always a combination of all those things. And to be in the presence of that, I think, is incredibly inspiring.
And Sonali, when you're not writing a million books and entertaining 22-year-olds in your home or neighborhood, what are you doing and what are you reading and what else are you excited about in life these days?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think being excited in life these days is hard work,
True.
And yeah, but that's a whole other conversation. So, we travel a whole lot, I think, seeing the world. The more of the world you see, again, I think the more you put yourself in a place where you can understand it better and better. And until we start understanding each other and the world, I think that it's going to get, the only way to solve it is love, like I said, right? Because that, and you can't, you can love a thing more when you're exposed to it and you understand it, and you see how it's all one thing. So we travel every opportunity I'm given, and I've kind of been fortunate because my husband travels for work, and he's literally like, I have to go to Sweden for a week, and I'll look up tickets and I'm like, oh, I think I can do that, and and take off. And we're not, I think we're very blessed in the fact that we're not planners. I can show up in a place and I'm like, oh, where does the subway go? And kind of go. and so seeing the world, I think, is an incredibly important thing for me. So we travel a lot. We're lucky enough and privileged enough to be able to do that. Cooking, I think, puts me, together. I think the last time we talked, you had said, someone was making chana, one of our husbands was making chana masala, something. So I think that, just gathering over food, being someone, who is an immigrant to America and has literally, we build a world from scratch, which is everybody does, but in terms of community, you create family, when you do that. And I think so much of that for me, my vehicle has been food, to just have, now I have grown children and we will have their friends. I think the way to get to know people is to get them talking, and food is a really good way to loosen tongues, a full belly. And so I think cooking and things, and of course, if I'm a master binger when my brain is ready for that. So watching good storytelling stories always, are. I found recently when I was reading, I found a really interesting thing, and this has been interesting for me personally because I grew up in India and I've, most of my adult life has been here. So there are these a few love stories, and I couldn't even, like, these rom-coms that I read that are set in India. So they're set in New Delhi, but they're incredibly contemporary and universal. And, we always joke about how immigrants get stuck in their country the year that they, so technically I should be stuck in 1996. But again, we're, lucky that we get to go back so much. So it's not as bad as I think it used to be, and with how global the world is. But these books are just so current and so of this time. And I think, again, I write Indian American books, and I was saying we're not a monolith, and there's like so many different experiences just within that, right? And so to read a book that is so urban and kind of, progressive in its thinking and yet tied to tradition, that is set in the place I grew up in, and so highly romantic and fun. So it's been, they completely blew my mind, and younger authors. So kind of their context growing up about being Indian is also so much more forcefully, owning their asking for, my generation was like, it was a fight. We will have independence. We're going to do this. And it's so much more natural for these, these younger authors. And I love it. So I'll tell you what the names of the two books were. One is called, oh my gosh, Never Meant to Stay. And it's set in New Delhi, in contemporary New Delhi. This diplomat's daughter who has to stay with this family, and, how she finds family finally. And she also kind of helps them find a lost piece of them through grief. And it's really lovely and hilarious. And it's called Never Meant to Stay. And the author is Trisha Das. So if, that's the other one. I don't know when it's coming out. It's called All That Sizzles, also set in New Delhi. And I'm from Bombay, and we have like Bombay and Delhi people have beef. I say that, but I have loved these two books. They've been fabulous.
Amazing. Okay. Last question, advice to aspiring authors.
Oh, gosh. I mean, the thing everybody says, perseverance is the only thing that matters, right? You can come out the gate raging and be, huge. If publishing is anything, it's inconsistent. And there will be highs, there will be lows. If you're stuck in a long low, then the only way to get out for the high to come is to just hang in there and continuously try to, better your craft and better yourself. And I think you have to love your own work. Mm-hmm. I think that is a thing that we are discouraged from in culture, because, humility and all of that, while it's important, if I go out and say, oh my God, my books are the best books and I absolutely love it, the tendency of the world is to discount me instantly as as somebody who's a braggart. So I don't mean that, but I mean actually truly loving the work you put on the page and constantly aspiring to make it better, but coming at it from a place of love. It is okay to say, I love my work. It's okay to own that fully. And I think that journey is parallel with the journey of staying, because so long as you believe what you're putting out in the world is important, which you have to believe, then you're not going to leave. You don't abandon important things. So I think your perseverance should come from a place of believing that the world needs to hear what you have to say, rather than exhaustion, which is like, I just have to hang in there because I've spent 10 years, the marriage analogy, which is like, you don't stay in a marriage because you've put investment into it. You stay in a marriage because you've put investment into it for a reason, and the reason has to be the marriage itself, right? So it's like that. Love your own work is what I'll say. Do the work to do that. Do the work to be able to say that, and then hang in there.
Or it's the sunk cost and you just have to move forward.
Well, there is that's what I'm saying. So when the love itself, when you work through it, and that is totally okay too, right? I mean, if you're done with that and you've done all you can and you no longer feel the love, then the honesty is fabulous. It's the best gift you can give yourself. But so long as you love it, hang in there.
Amazing. I don't even know if we're talking about marriage or writing anymore, but it doesn't matter.
Same thing. All love is equal, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sonali, thank you so much. Congratulations again. Lies and Other Love Languages. Keep going. Can't wait to see the next one. And yeah, thank you. Happy cooking.
Zibby. Okay. Be well. And, same. Keep doing the wonderful work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.